Welcome. This is a time for talking about our new wineskins and how putting the new wine into old wineskins will burst the wineskins. I love how Kelly last night talked about the organic process by which that happens. I appreciate so many foods and drinks, but then when people remind me that there are living things kind of crawling and creeping around in the things that I like, I always get a little squeamish, but so when you hear the phrase traditional church, what comes to mind? Shout out, and I'll make sure that I repeat it so our people on Zoom can hear. What is traditional church? What is a hallmark of traditional church? Board meetings, sermons, organ, yeah, hymns, sanctuary, choir, creeds. Ooh, she said the C word at a disciple event. Creeds. Pardon? A male pastor. Wow, we're going way back. Dressing up. Ooh, okay. Did somebody say Sunday school? Boredom. I like that. It's funny. I said Sunday school and she said boredom. It's like ladies in hats. Some people want me to wear a hat because the glare gets to them, but all right. Suits and ties. Yeah. So there are pews that have a shelf underneath for men's hats. I did not know that. Okay. So even the architecture of some churches, even the amenities in some churches are just say traditional church. Pews, stained glass windows. Yeah. I have nothing, baptistries. Yep. None of these things. I have no disparaging words to say about any of these things, but they are hallmarks of what we consider traditional church. What we have today, that's old wineskin stuff. What we have today is some churches that are engaged in ministry that go beyond what we consider traditional church ministry. And so we have three here that are on stage with us, and we have one up in Corning, First Christian Church in Corning, Karen Burnett from Corning, that's going to be sharing stories of the ministries that they have going on at their church right now that are a little different from what we would consider traditional church. And so I've asked them, as they tell their origin story, to talk about their biggest challenges, to talk about any kind of special preparations that they had to make that ministry possible, and the biggest joys and challenges that come along with that ministry too. And then what is going to happen is you will be able to ask questions, because the beauty of these events that we have, like annual gathering, is that we can come together and share our stories. So I want to hear from these churches. What they'll do is they will introduce themselves and the name of their church and the ministry that they are engaged in. So what I'm going to do is let Dana go first. I'm going to let Dana go first, and then I'm going to let Karen go, and then we'll just go on down the line.
Thanks, Jesse. Great to see everybody. And would you give me like a little signal when I have about 2 minutes left? All right. I just tend to get excited about the story. I'm Dana Bainbridge, pastor of Urban Sanctuary in San Jose. I've been at the congregation this fall, it will be 16 years. Ben Boren said when I was at my installation that he felt this might be one of the best pastor congregation matches he had ever seen. And I feel like, after 16 years later, I feel like that's still true. I couldn't be happier to be community with the people of this congregation. It's been an amazing journey to go on together, and I love them dearly. So when I came, we were First Christian of San Jose, and we've been on quite a journey. Our name now that we're operating out of is Urban Sanctuary, and that's a different story that I'm not really going to tell today, but that's who we are now anyway. And the reason I came was because it was my dream church when I was in seminary was a small, struggling, almost closing urban congregation in a poor neighborhood. And because I had been part of that in Nashville, Tennessee when I was in seminary, and found it a very exciting place to be because people were remarkably open to what we should do next at that point in life. And I didn't get the chance to do my dream church until I was 50 years old. And being there now has said that what those seeds God had planted in me didn't die, and they just needed time to germinate until I was ready. And so apparently I wasn't ready till I was 50. And when I came, the congregation said, "We don't know if you should move across the country to California because we only have 2 years worth of money and then we'll be broke." And you have a daughter, and I'm not so sure that's a good idea, but I loved who they were and what their commitments were. And there was a vision forward that I could see that seemed really possible because I knew they were open and willing, and they had already had so much evidence of their commitments. And it just felt one of those laws of attraction that we should be together. So I came, and I didn't know how that would go, though. And I think a piece of that history, one of the questions Jesse got great questions for us to consider was there an aha moment? And it's my aha moment was actually before I came. Is I had been on a sabbatical in Washington, D.C., where I had spent some time with some people in a model of church that I was so attracted to. It's called the Church of the Savior in Washington, D.C. And these are small groups of people without pastors or buildings that plant themselves in neighborhoods, live deeply in their neighborhoods, and then respond to the need in their neighborhood and go deep into that. And almost all those little churches started big nonprofits. And they have little cells of churches all over the particular neighborhood in Washington, D.C., the Church of the Savior does, where those congregations are living in relationship with their neighborhoods in a really transformative way. And one of the churches I had seen was called New Community Church, and it was one of the few that actually had a pastor. And the church was small, and he talked about how much he loved serving a small church, but it also had started, like all of them, a nonprofit that they were working with in their neighborhood. So they were able to sustain the pastor's position, who was half-time with the church and half-time with the nonprofit that was actually housed on their property. And I felt like that was a really interesting model of church that I was really attracted to. So when I heard about First Christian in San Jose, I was like, I think that model could work there. And that might be actually kind of the solution to their situation. The congregation was really so dedicated to opening the doors to people who were struggling with homelessness and poverty downtown. Had been doing this for 2 decades before I came, but it was hard to sustain in the way that it was being done. And people were getting tired and a little burned out. And so I came and we listened, and eventually what we ended up doing, it's kind of a longer story, but we started what was called the Recovery Cafe. And that was actually connected with a Church of the Savior leader who had started the Recovery Cafe in Seattle, Washington, there. And we went and learned that model and brought it back. And it was we had been doing food and shelter for people. And as I got involved in that and learned a lot and listened to the stories of the people who were coming in the doors, we went through some really hard times where we lost a lot of people, where in a short period of time, 3 people died. And I started to wonder if I emotionally could do this, because my heart was breaking. And then I read something about your heart is not breaking, it's just expanding so that you can develop greater capacity for love. That's the pain you feel, is the pain of expansion in your heart. And so part of what we've had to do is figure out how to expand our capacity for love. And I wanted to expand our capacity to be able to really transform lives rather than just put food on the table. And so it became clear that there was such a need for inner healing in people's lives, not just for food and shelter. You know, I thought of how Jesus said, we don't live by bread alone. And that it was really clear that people needed way more than just food. They needed a chance to heal from all they were going through. So the Recovery Cafe model gave us that opportunity. And so we started and we opened, we took 2 years to build the whole infrastructure of the Recovery Cafe, to raise 2 years worth of money to support it in advance. And then we opened the doors and moved forward, and so many things happened in the process. And we just yesterday had the 10-year celebration of Recovery Cafe being open now. Yeah. With our annual fundraiser. And we could say that when the first year we opened, we had 30 the cafe's a membership community. It's a healing community in itself. And I believe it was actually founded on the model of spiritual community. It's not a church. It's a secular or nonprofit, but it's a membership, a community of belonging. And so first year, 30 members. Now 10 years, we have 250 members in Recovery Cafe. The first year, 4 recovery circles a week. Everybody's in a recovery circle. Now we have 22 recovery circles a week with all different people in those recovery circles. So first year, $150,000 budget. Now $1 million budget. So we have a lot. We've been able to really build the capacity of Recovery Cafe, and to feel like we can see people who may have passed on by now, and they'll say over and over again, Recovery Cafe saved my life. And so I think for me, that's one of the things we've done. And the biggest challenge has been, I think, for me and for others, just to get over the whole idea of there are the helpers and the helped. That we offer charity instead of justice and actually transform the social structures that are causing the problems. But because we're so inclined, just the charity is easier, the idea of helping someone else is easier rather than building them up, making them a leader, making them independent, helping them be independent and strong and be the ones. Many of our cafe members are leaders of much of our programs as they come in. So just overcoming that mindset, I think, has been the biggest challenge. And then one other thing that we've started doing now recently in the last couple of years is expanding our congregation. We're always asking about how can we be in ministry? It's not like how can we save the church? Where's ministry needed? And I think that's how the Recovery Cafe got started. And then, and how is it sustainable? And so now we're actually looking at people just aren't, that word church, as we just heard earlier, is such a colonizing word and so traumatic for a lot of people. So we've now started a program called the Center for Arts, Spirituality, and Activism. And we're starting to invite community partners around the arts and around community organizing, because we're right next to City Hall. We're starting to use our location, which is often the place next to protests and going to city council meetings, as a place for community organizers to gather and to organize and to collaborate, all the different groups. And we're also doing that through the arts and through supporting those leaders through spiritual renewal in a non-traditional way, like Saturday mini retreats and things like that. So we were able to get a really a generous grant from the Black Disciples Foundation. And last year, as part of our center, we passed on that money to some Black leaders in the community in San Jose who are leading nonprofits and leading social justice movements to have a whole wellness day together where they just took care of themselves. And they planned their whole retreat, a wellness retreat for Black leaders. Then they used our building and spent that money that we just passed on to them. And so it's those kind of things that we're trying to do to just open the doors to the community and say, what do you need to renew? How can we keep you restored and healthy in your work? And so those have been some of the things. I think the special preparations, you just kind of get prepared as you go, right? You don't even know what you need to do to prepare. But what I've always found is that working as teams is one of the most rewarding and important parts of this work. So we just look around and say, what kind of gifts do we need? And we call on people in the community, whether they're part of our church at all, ask them for advice, ask them if they want to be part of it. And so I think for me, one of the biggest joys in all of this has been feeling like we're part of the fabric of the community now, going all over the community and finding people I know who are working with us on different things, and just feeling like we are in deep relationship with each other. And so I feel so blessed to have all these people in our lives, to have a Hindu dance festival because of a Hindu artist who came and worked with us. So many things like that are just kind of organic, start to happen as the relationships that you call upon are next to you. So just a few things anyway. Thanks. All right.
So now we're going to take a turn. We're going to go from urban to rural. And I'd like to introduce Karen Burnett from First Christian Church in Corning. Karen, just go ahead and introduce yourself and let's hear your story.
Hi. I don't know how loud I'm talking because I had to turn you guys up really loud. Am I too loud?
No, you're fine.
Hi, I'm Karen, and I'm from First Christian Church, Corning. We're a church that is over 100 years old. We were actually a church before Corning was Corning. We were originally, the town was called Riceville, and then it became Corning later. So we've had a long history in the town, and at one point we've had over 150 members. And when I started coming here about 15 years ago, we had 12. We had 12 little old ladies and gentlemen that were all in their late 70s, early 80s, who were our core members of the church. And this last March, we lost our last one. And so, you know, now we're a completely new church. We had a pastor, Pastor Bill, about 15 years ago. I guess he started about 17 years ago. He was here for about 2.5 years, and he started a meal on Wednesday nights for anyone who wanted to come in and eat. And it started out where he was just meeting people on the streets and just saying, hey, come and eat, come and eat. And it was the potluck. And so my family and I started coming to that. The reason I came to this church, I don't know, I had this all written out and then I don't know what I did with what I wrote out. So this is kind of a mess, but just bear with me. Years ago, I was raised in church. I was raised Lutheran, and my mom and my sister and I went to church every Sunday. And then, like most kids, I kind of drift away from the church. But when my son was born, I started going to church, and I started praying that my mom and my sister would come to church with me, and they weren't going to church. And being raised Lutheran, I thought my mother would never go to a different church, but she started coming up here. She'd met Pastor Bill somewhere and started coming to this church. And I'd been praying and praying for them to come to church with me. And I am not one of those people that said I've heard God speak to me very plainly many times, but I woke up in the middle of the night and I swear that God said to me, you know, your mom and your sister are going to church. Why aren't you going to church with them? And this was not at all what I was used to as a church, because there were 12 members. There was no music. It was boring. It was old. It was dry. It was, you know, all those things that you think of as an old yuck church, you
all
know.
those things that we mentioned right before.
Exactly. But for some reason, this church just took me in, and I don't know why. I think that God he had a plan for my family, because Pastor Bill left rather suddenly. He kind of said, well, I'm done with this church. I'm moving to Washington. And he did within like a month. And when he left, we had been doing some remodeling, and we found out the remodeling had cost a lot more than we had anticipated. And we were left with about $16,000 worth of debt. And this is where our sister church, who has a humongous part of our story, which is our First Christian Church in Chico. Without our sister church, our church would have never survived. I can't even begin to tell you how much we need our sister churches. If we hadn't had the support and the love, we would have been gone 15 years ago. They were miracle workers, and they took away $10,000 worth of our debt immediately for us overnight. But that meant we still had a huge debt. And my family and our little church members, we held bake sales and yard sales and raffles. And I don't know how we did it, except for it was God's will that every month when it came time to pay the bills, for probably 4 years, our church checkbook never went above $100 more than our bills were. And yet every month there was just enough to pay, and all of our people that we owed money to were willing to take $20 and $40 and $50 a month until we were paid off. And that's when I knew that God wanted this church to be here, because he willed it to be here. There were months where my family paid the bills, but there were months where we could afford to pay the bills. Then that doesn't always happen. I mean, we're not rich by any stretch of the imagination. And so we still kept up our Wednesday night dinners, and those kind of spread. And so we started getting more homeless people coming in, or more people that were just living on the edge. And then I said, well, this is kind of silly. We're doing a dinner on Wednesday. Why don't we do a lunch on Sunday after church? And so we started doing a lunch on Sunday. And that was about, I'd say 12 years ago. So we were doing 2 meals a week. And I also then I thought, well, we might as well start a food pantry. So we started gathering up, and we put a small food pantry in. And then I had this idea that we really wanted to do. I wanted to have a laundry room, and we had a bathroom. One of the things that we had done with remodeling is we had made a bathroom over to have a shower and to make it like a little apartment. So I knew that could be turned into a laundry room and a shower room and that kind of thing. But I didn't have the money to do the rewiring and the plumbing for the laundry area. So that was a wish that I had for a long time. So we started putting money aside for that. And on Wednesdays and Sundays, we were getting, like 12 to 15 homeless at least coming for a meal. And then during the week, the homeless knew kind of my schedule on when I would be at church. So I would have them stop by to see if I could make them a sandwich. So most weeks I was making sandwiches 2 or 3 days a week for people. And then when COVID hit and the homeless, there was nothing for the homeless. Corning is really small, so we don't really have services anyway. If you need anything, you have to go to Red Bluff, which is about 20 miles away. And so our town manager asked me if I could do meals every day for the homeless. And that's what started our big jump in how we were growing. We got the some money from the CARES Act, and so we did meals for 200 days straight. It was myself and one of my little homeless girls that decided that she wanted to help me, and we were getting 15 to 20 homeless a day coming. So I knew that we could do every day. But then when that money ran out, I didn't have money for food for every day. So that was still something that we were hoping for and wishing for. And then when the second round of CARES money came, is when I got to get a washer and a dryer. And so then we could have laundry and showers, because you can't have showers. I was letting people do showers, and then I was taking laundry home and trying to get laundry caught up at my house, which really was just not working. And I couldn't afford to take clothes to the laundromat. But when we got a washer and dryer here, then we started doing showers and laundry, and our program just expanded greatly. This last year, we applied for one of the big boy grants, and we now have one paid staff member. So we're open 7 days a week. We're open 5 hours a day. We're doing 6 to 8 showers a day and 4 or 5 loads of laundry a day. And we're doing at least 15 to 20 meals. We're still doing a lot more on our Wednesday and our Sunday meals. We're doing about 25 there. But, God is so good. We don't have a pastor here, but we have church every Sunday. We have Kevin and Georgia from First Christian Church in Chico who come over once a month. And then I read sermons every week until I find one that I think is speaking to me. And I think if it's speaking to me, it's going to speak to some of my guys. We don't have church up in front where we have the beautiful sanctuary. We do it in the back where we eat. I found that nobody wants to go up in the church. They just think they don't belong up there. So I have them, but if we're sitting around our tables in our back where we eat, I don't have it. I have it more like you would do it at home. I have my grandma's dining table and my great grandma's and my aunties and my best friend's mom's dining table. So we sit around in family gatherings. So it's like a family, because I tell them every single time we get together that we are a family that God has put together. And when we have church in the back, I have 10 or 12 that come. And when we have church up front, it's just, my church family that has a home. And so, anyway, that's my story. I know it was only a couple of minutes, but
I can't tell you how many churches I've worked in other regions. When we were in the Virginia region, there's so many smaller churches that would get down to just a few people, and they'd just be like, "Oh, we're done," and they just kind of became this hospice church. And First Christian Corning is like, "Nope, we're not going to be a hospice church. We're going to be doing Jesus ministry until we can't do it anymore." And they're doing a fabulous job. So thank you, Karen. I appreciate you being able to come here. Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Spencer, he, him. I'm the pastor at Niles Discovery Church, which is a UCC DOC congregation in Fremont, between Oakland and San Jose. Niles has been around for about a dozen years. It is formed by the merger of Niles Congregational Church and First Christian Church of Fremont. That merger is its own story. I'll just say that about that, because I think this one thing is important. The question we asked while we were in conversation about whether or not to merge the two congregations was simply, can we do more for God together than we can do separately? And so that was sort of the question we used to discern whether or not to merge. And the answer we came to was yes. But both of those churches have an interesting legacy. So Niles Congregational Church dates back to 1894 or something like that. First Christian Church had been around, I think, longer than the city of Fremont had by a few years. Started right about the same time the city of Fremont incorporated. And Niles is a neighborhood of the 5 villages that formed Fremont. Well, both of these churches, First Christian Church and Niles Congregational Church, had a legacy of incubating. They didn't know it at the time, I don't think, but of incubating ministries. The Tri-City Volunteers Food Bank started out when 2 women, member Mary Hewitt and Grace Draper, a member of Niles Congregational, member First Christian Fremont, got together because there were folk living on the edge, living rough in the neighborhood, and needed assistance. And so, getting clothing, getting food, that kind of stuff available for the folk living rough. It became now South Alameda County's biggest food bank. And it became this separate organization because it started as a church ministry that just kept growing and then launched as its own thing. Abode Services is the homelessness coalition of the Tri-Cities, Fremont, Newark, and Union City, and now it's much beyond that. And it started because of an ecumenical group in the church that both First Christian and Niles Congregational were part of, and needing to address the homelessness. At that point, it started out as building a shelter. And now it's this major housing development, not just providing shelter type services, but a housing development organization where they are building low-income housing because government agencies aren't. And so it's a pretty powerful ministry. And so those sorts of things are in the legacy. Niles Congregational Church found Tri-City Food Bank, decided they wanted to try a different model where instead of making people come to the food bank, let's bring the food bank to the people. And so they got grant money for a van, little truck, and wanted volunteers to go and take it out to various spots around the Tri-Cities to staff it. And they came to Niles Discovery Church, the church that was made of the churches that launched the food bank to begin with, and said, can we pilot this? And so we organized the volunteers and started that going. And now they have 3 food trucks and have taken over the coordination of the volunteers because it worked so well. And one of the reasons it worked so well is because Niles put together the volunteers to make it work and showed that it could be done. City of Fremont has got a major homelessness problem. The latest stat that I heard was for every person that moves out of homelessness in Fremont, 2.4 people become homeless. And so it's a problem that's getting worse. The city of Fremont got some grant money, and what they wanted to do was build a navigation center, housing navigation center, to provide a space for people to live safely so they don't have to think about housing for a period of time. And I think it was up to 6 months. San Francisco's tended to do, I think it was 3 months. 6 months, get special services that that particular person needed that generally don't fall into something to be able to get back on their feet. So what I really need is $1,000 worth of dental care so that I can then eat nutritiously, so that I can then go job hunting. Well, where do you get that $1,000? So this housing navigation center is sort of, let's do some really intense work for folk to help them move to stable housing. So the money was there. The question is where to build it. And Niles Discovery Church has got a long, narrow piece of property, and part of it we call Squirrel Hill because it's got lots of ground squirrels that inhabit it. It's not much of a hill, but got lots of ground squirrels. And we said, how about building it here? And so we went to the city and proposed that build it on our property. We'll create some sort of a partnership with ministry out of that. And the neighbors came unglued. But it shifted the discussion. In most other communities, people who opposed the Housing Navigation Center just said it shouldn't be done. In Fremont, because a church stepped forward and said, please put it in our backyard, the community couldn't say it was a bad idea. What they could say is, oh, there are better places over there for it. And so the debate in Fremont became one of where's the best place to put it? And while we didn't get to then make the Housing Navigation Center part of our ministry, the city council decided, well, the safe place to put it is in our backyard. And so they put it in the parking lot at City Hall. As a way to say, we'll put it in our backyard. And I am convinced that the reason that it happened and continues to be successful is because Niles Discovery Church shifted the community debate about it into making it practical. So those sorts of things have gone on. We've got other things that are happening around homelessness. As I said, major issue. The city of Fremont has a safe parking program, and there are a number, I think it's like 4 congregations, faith communities that are letting the safe parkers park in their parking lot for a month, and then it moves to another location. And so Niles was maybe the first congregation to sign up, certainly one of the first to sign up to be part of that program. So folk were parking, and all we were promising, city said that you're allowing folk to park and spend the night in your parking lot, and they'll be out of there by such and such time in the morning, and they can start parking at such and such time at night. And that was all they're asking the faith communities. And Niles Discovery Church said, no, that's not going to work for us. We need to be providing breakfast. And so it was bring breakfast out to the cars the first couple months we did it. And I think after a year, it was, this is stupid. Why are we bringing breakfast out to them? We've got a kitchen and a social hall. Let's bring them into breakfast. And so it's usually a hot breakfast most mornings now that's done. And it's one of the things that's helpful is that it's a month, and then we have a few months off. And so organizing folk to do it and step up and spend that energy, and then they get to step back and recoup. And so it's that seems to be working really well for our congregation. The aha moment for us around this ministry, I think, happened when there was a similar model that Abode was doing called the Winter Relief Program, which was the families that were on the waiting list for the shelter would be housed during the rainy months in fellowship halls for a month of churches, and move around in those fellowship halls. And, people would peel off from the waiting list, move into the shelter, and families that were on the waiting list for Winter Relief would move in. And so there'd be, I think it was 20 families on average. And we would do that for a month, and it was an all hands on deck thing because it was picking the families up from a central location. It was providing dinner. It was doing homework type stuff and games with folk before lights out. And so it's very intense. And then breakfast in the morning and making sure they left with a brown bag lunch. And that program ended because the Homelessness Coalition, Abode Services, decided to move to a rapid rehousing model, that they figured out that the solution to homelessness was homes. Yeah. And so, instead of shelters. So when somebody fell into homelessness, their goal was to move them back into an apartment as quickly as possible. And so what they needed from churches, rather than sort of shelter space or sub-shelter space, was money for the first and the last, and the security and the and furniture, because a lot of folk that fall into homeless, they get up and leave behind their possessions. And so kitchenwares and that kind of thing. But it wasn't hands-on. It wasn't connecting with the people. And so the aha moment for the church was, we need to be doing stuff where we connect with people. And I still think there's a degree to which some of what we're doing, like with the safe parking program, we've got a little free pantry that Sandy, wave your hand, Sandy, was the prime instigator behind and bringing up. And it's, if you've got extra food, drop it off. If you need extra food, pick it up. And there's no gatekeeping at all. And some days the cupboard is bare because nobody's deposited and people have taken. But it sort of runs itself. And that in some ways, I think a lot of that's charity work and not the transformational justice work that you were talking about. But I look to that there's a desire to do that transformational work. It's just not always clear what it looks like. And we sort of stumbled into it with the Housing Navigation Center. I've gone over my time already, haven't I? I'm still okay. Okay, good. Because I got a little more I want to talk about. So there's but wait, there's more. You also get these Ginsu knives. There are two other programs that are three other programs that are happening at the church that are, well, not new, but they're new to us, I guess I'd say. So we've got a green team that's very, very active around the climate crisis. I really want to see them move from helping the church and the members of the church decrease their carbon footprints to transforming policy to actually really address the climate crisis. That's that sort of charity versus justice work again, trying to figure out how to do that. We've got a group for families that have little kids to be supportive and trying to build networking. Part of that's hopefully church growth as well. But to provide that networking going on just in the neighborhood. And then there is no LGBTQ plus community center in South Alameda County. There's something in Hayward, there's something in San Jose, but there's nothing. And Fremont's the fourth biggest city in the Bay Area, 250,000 people. And there's no LGBTQ center or anything like that. And so my bet is that what we're doing, if it works, is going to, and it's only a few months old, but my bet is that if it works, it's going to be another incubation story where we're going to start something and launch it. But that doing a ministry there that I think is important. One other question that I want to say this one. This is biggest joy of doing this. I want to say this. I'm not in charge. That's my biggest joy. That these are things that are happening organically in the life of the church, and that's really exciting to me.
Yeah. Hillary. Wow, Jeff. So I'm Hillary Marckx, pastor of the Geyserville Christian Church in Geyserville, California, which is up 101, about 7 miles north of Healdsburg, if anybody knows where Healdsburg is, right in Alexander Valley, where we were away from me. We were founded in 1884. When I got to church, my first Sunday there, they managed to scrape together 12 people. We've gone up and down and up and down, and I was told by one of the members that never worry about whether it's big or small, because it'll be big and small, and it just rotates up and down. So that's kind of our story in terms of population. But we understand ourselves as a community church. We are the only church in town. When I was hired not to be the church pastor. They actually said to me, we need someone in church to run the service and preach, but we really don't need stuff that preachers do. But we're the only church in town, and we're going to hire you to do our services, but to be the town pastor. So, I've done that fairly well. I have buried a good sized population out of the town. We run, let's see, we started Christmas basket program that started off with about 25 people and has gone up to 90 with this year, and we gave out 500 presents to each person. And that's kind of done in relationship with the town, because we raised this year, I think it was close to $14,000 just from the town to buy food and gifts, and then what's left over goes into a fund that I just throw away. You know, I give to people as they come and knock on the door and need help. Families, houses get burned out and we refinish it or help them out. When the fires came through, we were able to help some families that were in need because we had this money. And but the church itself, I've come to understand it more as a ministry than a church. We have members, and I'd like to try to read this off. We have multiple members who work in healthcare, chaplaincy, education, several in music. One is on the board of directors for a healthcare complex. 2 are in seminary. There are several working and exhibiting artists. We operate the Geyserville Center for Wellness, offering counseling and spiritual direction within the community. Now, I have some goodies over there on that table I brought just to hand out in case somebody wants to see more. But we also do, which was kind of interesting, during COVID, I had a whole bunch of people locked up in healthcare facilities, senior living places and memory care that I couldn't see or visit. And so I started sending them little postcards that had a nice picture on it and some kind of a happy sentiment. I think I started that in about the end of 2019, and it's still going. And then I started posting it on the Geyserville Christian Church Facebook page, the Church Off the Center Facebook page, and my own. And that has actually turned out to be one of the biggest outreach ministries we do. I've had people come to tell me just how much that means to them. I title it, Dear Geyserville Peeps. And I got an email or a message on Facebook a couple of years ago from this woman, and her husband was a musician, and I worked with him. They were both Druids. And she said, don't ever stop, Dear Geyserville Peeps. She doesn't even live in town. But let's see, what else do I have here? And I bought a stack of those if you want some of those cards. You can just go over there and grab them. We collect canned and packaged food for the Redwood Empire Food Bank. They give really a lot to Geyserville, so we thought we'd start giving back to them by collecting cans and giving those back. We offer our space for a weekly AA meeting. And we hold a weekly jam for musicians, songwriters mainly. That's what I am as a songwriter, so I hang out with a lot of them. And then because of that, we invite musicians to come in once a quarter and do a musical presentation. Doesn't have to be Christian. I say nothing churchy, preachy, Christiany, just something uplifting. And so we've had some really fine musicians that have shared some huge stages with major musicians come in. And I try to give them some money, you know, like $100, but a lot of times they just look at me and say something you can't repeat and walk off. Our biggest challenge, well, it's always for me because I'm the only pastor. I have no backup, so it's me. So time is my challenge. I do what I can as I can, and everybody understands that. If they want something really badly, I just say, yeah, go ahead, huh? And then they settle down and give me the time to do it. But having a church full of not ordained ministers, but a church full of ministries run by people who think of themselves as doing ministry. And I have preached for 30 years in this church, because I was hired there in 94. I have preached that you don't ever know if the person you're talking to could be Jesus. Likewise, you don't know if you're Jesus when that person's talking to you. And they took it to heart. They believe it. And they act like it. So, let's see, what else? Biggest joys. My biggest joy right now is that I have managed to lift up my elders to not only preach, but do communion. And if I'm gone on a Sunday or just don't feel like showing up, they'll take it over. I've got music covered. I've got preaching covered. I've got the whole thing covered. And to me, that's cool. You know, it sure makes it a little lighter for Sunday if I feel like, well, like last year I had a gig on a Sunday and I said, I got this gig. It's a lot of money, you know. So they said, oh, go do it. Go do it. You know, we can take it. So they did. And so I'm pretty proud of that group. What else? Yeah, just watching grace happen in front of me. That's my biggest joy. Anyway, aha moments. There's too many. I mean, they just keep happening, you know.
That's incredible. And 12 years ago, I remember going to a workshop at annual gathering, and they talked about how every church has time, energy, and resources, and how you use the combinations of those time, energy, and resources determines whether you're going to be a hospice church. In other words, where you're just like, oh, I don't know what we're going to do. We're just going to do the same things over and over again until we run out of money and run out of this and run out of that. And that's the end. Or it could be a legacy church, which, you know, not bad. It's like, we're tired. We don't know whether we can continue doing this. So we're going to get our resources together, and we're going to make sure that these resources go to a ministry that reflects our values. Or you can spend all of the resources and time looking for the energy, which is the ministry needs of the community, and determine what those ministry needs are and do Jesus work that addresses those ministry needs. And for me, that's what it sounds like all of these churches. That's the common theme that I am hearing among all of the churches represented here today. Now it's your chance to ask some questions of our panelists. And if you raise your hand, I'll bring the mic to you because we want to make sure that our folks on Zoom can hear this. So questions, comments? Oh, I thought that was you raising your hand, but you've got the remote because you're trying to track me. Okay, there we go. Monica.
Thank you for your ministry and the difficult hard work of Jesus that you do. Yeah, so I was curious as far as raising up new leaders in the congregations. Is there a program for that within your congregations? That's the question.
A program specifically to help train up new leaders? I can answer that really simply, no.
I'm laughing because that's kind of my amen. But I think that also just noticing people's gifts and, part of what we're hearing a lot in communities is that lived experience is a training program in itself. So having people who have like lived experience of homelessness or of mental health challenges and who have been through healing process of recovery to actually support them to become leaders. We do in the Recovery Cafe have some, so our people who are in recovery circles, some of them eventually become the facilitators of those recovery circles. And we do have a few training programs in the Recovery Cafe to help them with facilitation skills and things like that, or mental health 101. So if somebody in the group is suicidal or something like that, they know kind of what are some important steps to take in response to that. But at the same time, we found that we often had to go outside the congregation to find people with the gifts and the resources that we needed to do the next thing that we felt called to do.
So, anyone here ever heard of Fred Craddock? I believe I don't know if he said it exactly like this, but he said to preach so they can hear you listening. And so I raise up people by listening. I learned something one time. One of the first pastors that I worked with in the Protestant denomination was, oh God, there he went. Anyway, someone would say something to him and he'd say, I don't know that I can do that, but you sound like you've got the energy. And that's not bad. Yeah, it could have been, but it was Francis Geddes. Francis Geddes, he was pastor in Fairfax, UCC pastor. Anyway.
That's great. This morning when Tony asked who here has the only disciple congregation in their town, I was wondering why you kind of chuckled before you raised your hand. You're the only church in that town. That's amazing.
Well, now there is the ISIS Oasis on the other end of town, and they have a 501c3.
Karen.
We're, I think, smaller than all the other three churches that are talking today. My niece is one of my, is working as one of our staff members, and she has a lot of energy, and I think she is the one that is helping to at least be maybe the next person who takes over. I'm hoping. We're so small. I don't really have anybody else. She's 23 and I'm not, so she has a lot more energy.
Any other questions for our panelists? Here we go.
I know you mentioned the CARES Act and some help from the city of Fremont. I was just wondering about alternate sources of funding, if you've done any grant writing or other ways to fund some of the ministries once they look like they're going to take.
Again, I feel a little broken record here, but we formed teams. And so we've had lots of ups and downs financially with the Recovery Cafe. Fortunately, with Recovery Cafe, making it a separate 501c3 that was not connected to the church made us have access to a way broader stream of grants. But we formed at one point when we were going through a really scary period financially. We had grown a lot and expanded our staff. And then kind of we hit a wall in terms of what we were raising. And we formed a grant writing team, and there was somebody from NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, who was a former Methodist pastor who was an amazing grant writer who loved the Recovery Cafe, came on the team. We took the program director. We got a finance person, and then we had a friend who worked at the county who knew, the angles on all the grants, and who would come in once in a while and meet with us. And we just created a whole pipeline of grant opportunities and started to work through each one of them and turned the financial situation around. But I think without the team, if it would have been falling, I was writing some of the early grants, it would have been falling on my shoulders, and I was pretty overwhelmed at that point, quite frankly. I'm not 23 either. And so having the team, it just made us so much better at it. So I just have such love and appreciation for all those people who just came together to help. So for churches, it's trickier with grants, though, isn't it? Yeah. But there are starting to be a few more, and you might look around your area. Just in San Jose, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation started issuing RFPs for faith and neighborhood grants, and I've never seen that before. And that just started happening. So there might be some places in your own counties and areas that might see the value. There's starting to see how much faith communities are doing. I mean, you listen to these stories. It's amazing what faith communities are doing in their cities. And I think the areas are starting to realize that and might be a lot more willing. I know there's a church in Hayward that is getting a tremendous amount of Alameda County grants for some programs they have too. So it's possible, more than I think that it has been in the past.
Nice. Does anybody else have any questions for any of our panelists? Okay.
As you're moving the microphone, Niles Discovery Church actually has not received money from the city, but our community reputation has become one where individuals who are not part of faith communities but are concerned about issues in the community are donating money specifically to our homelessness ministries, which is sort of a surprising thing. Now, that's restricted to those ministries because that's how the gift arrived. But unexpected by me, that's for sure.
I know that when you're doing this kind of work, that it has a profound effect on your personal life. And I was just wondering if there are any particular incidences or stories or things that have happened that really affected you personally.
Is that a question for a particular person or for okay, Karen, do you want to address that one? I don't want to leave.
I didn't hear I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing that. I didn't hear the question.
Oh, okay. I said doing this type of work sometimes has a profound effect on your own life when you've been doing it for a while. And I was wondering if there was a particular incident that that may have affected you in, let's say, in a positive way.
I've been doing this now for a while, and during this time, we've lost 10 10 of our people that came to eat on a regular basis. And to be really honest with you, it's been really hard. And I'm not going to lie. About a year ago, we lost one that was very close to me. She was the girl I talked about that helped me with the when COVID started. She had a seizure and died in the middle of the night, and I've had to have some counseling for that. It's hard. You love these people, and when I say they're my family, I really mean it. Some of them don't have any family at all, or the family that they were born into can't accept how they are now, and they burn so many bridges that maybe they really don't have any family left. And I think that's one of the gifts that God has given me, is that I have the ability to love anybody. I might not like what they've done or how they're acting, but that doesn't affect how I can love them. Pastor Ben told me a long time ago that all means all, and that really hit me hard. And so I have it tattooed on the inside of my wrist if I ever forget it, so that I can keep remembering. And when I hit a situation where I'm doubting that, then I can just look down and it's right here, so I can remind myself. But yes, it's hard. This is really hard. It's not. There are a lot of days where you don't come home feeling warm and fuzzy from work, and some days it's work. A lot of days it's work. It's not going to church and feeling joy and love. It's work. But it's also a lot about loving.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, I preach forgiveness a lot. And I've had two people leave the church because they couldn't be in a church where forgiveness was preached like that. And one Sunday, wow, I had a woman stand up in the back of the church and she said, "Do you mean that I've got to forgive that son of a bitch that's my son's father?" And I said, "Well, yes." A month later, she came back and said she did it, and it changed her life.
Nice.
If I can share just a quick story. Previous church I served up in Washington State, we're in a rural part of King County. And there was a guy who lived in his van. His license plate, he had a vanity license plate, HOMLESS. And he would drive around the state because he knew where he could stop to get assistance, but he wouldn't overstay his welcome anywhere. And he knew that when he got to Carnation, where I was, that I'd always give him a night in a hotel, let him have it was almost always winter when he came by. So warm night in a hotel, access to hot water, that sort of thing. And then he stopped showing up. And I assumed he had died. And about 2-3 years later, I got a letter from him saying, "Well, I really got too old to live in my van anymore, so I took the VA up on their offer, and I'm in housing now, and life is pretty darn good." And I'm convinced the reason he sent me the letter was that all is all. That the sense of welcome when he came, it got to the point literally that when I saw him outside, I was like, I pulled out my pastor's discretionary notebook and I called the motel that I knew would accept money from us, and that kind of thing. And he just was, I treated him with respect, and as a result, he treated me with respect. And that, here that's 25 years later, And I still carry that in my heart, that moment. Never know what seeds we're planting. Never know what seeds we're planting.
That's a great question. There, we had a guy who was, I got to know in the beginning years. His name was Andre Ellison, and I would describe him as sheer joy. He looked a little bit like Bob Marley, and he loves music. And whenever you're around him, he's just this exuberance all the time. And through our program, eventually Andre came to work for us doing security and some with some residential program we had for a while. And he started making more money than he ever had made, I think, for a while anyway. And I would be up in my office and I'd hear this steps coming, like 3 steps at a time coming up the stairs. And I'm like, oh, here comes Andre. And he'd peek around the corner, and he had always had this just amazing light in his eyes. And he said, I've got a new girlfriend. And I said, oh. And then he would pull from around the corner some instrument that he had just bought. It might be a saxophone, it might be a new guitar, whatever. And so we had this tradition. He would run up and introduce me to his new girlfriends. He bought a lot of instruments in those days. And just the joy of my friendship with Andre all those years just was something really it's something so treasured that I had. And he often played, we had open mic nights and things like that. He would love to do that. And during COVID, a lot of us lost contact with each other, and Andre had an apartment of his own, and come to find out, we did not know he had cancer, and he died during COVID of his cancer, and we had no idea. Someone came and told us later, and I just was utterly heartbroken to have not. We were his community, and I felt a lot of shame about not being there for him. And we had a big service later for him because he was known in the community and loved by our partners as well. And so people from Momentum and Destination Home and all these nonprofits came to Andre's service. And later I got an email from the director of Destination Home that they had wanted, after the summer when George Floyd was murdered, the growing awareness of the need to really support BIPOC leadership in our nonprofits and strengthen those organizations. They established a fund that would give hundreds of thousands of dollars to nonprofits that were developing BIPOC leadership in their organization and strengthening those communities. And they named it the Andre Ellison Equity Fund. It was named after him. It's named after him, and that money goes out every single year and gives tremendous support to those nonprofits. I can't think of anyone more deserving.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Any other questions? Online question?
This is a comment from Nick. He says, it seems like all of the pastors who spoke in this segment really stepped outside of the box to make things happen. It also took a lot of guts and risk-taking. Also, the ministry outside specifically theological studies worked for several of their communities, which is awesome.
Thanks,
Indeed.
Nick.
Indeed.
You going to say something about Eden and grants? Eden United Church of Christ is the church in Hayward that's gotten grants.
But I will echo that the philanthropic landscape has shifted enormously so. And not just private foundations, but public monies that are wanting to partner with folks like us. And I think that COVID-19 really showed what we are all about. And just this year, the Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications of the Governor's Office has announced a tranche of 70 million for community-based organizations that are doing this type of work for climate resilience. And they actually put in their press release, faith-based organizations. Things are changing.
I'd like just make a little comment. I'm not sure if it's yeah, anything's appropriate, right? So I was thinking about the stuff outside the theological box. I'm not sure that there's anything outside the theological box. I think everything is within it. And as I was listening to all of you and thinking of my own experience and thinking of the next big moment in the church cycle, I was thinking that we all have been empowered by that Holy Spirit. And what took a bunch of sniveling cowards and turned them into bold ministers of the gospel. And I think that most of us are challenged to sit in that room and become those empowered ministers. And it's not easy, but it certainly is better than not.
Makes me think of the quote, if we really believed what we preached, we would hand out life jackets and hard hats as people came into church.
I like it. Nice. Any others?
I did want to add that First Christian Church in Corning, we do get money from the Continuum of Care, which we got CARES Act money through COVID. And when that money ran out, we're now receiving money from the Continuum of Care, which is government-based money. So they are giving money to churches if you, and they do pay for things like our electric bill and our garbage service, our internet, so they're paying church bills as part of the program.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Not really a question. I just want to say thank you. It's very eye-opening because we tend to think that theology is just theology. The Bible is what we were brought up in, but to hear you, how to get out of the box, and it just made me think of how Paul was selling tents while he was managing his church as well. Yeah, but there's a term that I forgot. It has to do with grants. They ask you to do deliverables, right? And if there's such a deliverable as to help a small church, I volunteer Stockton to put your deliverables there. Thank you.
This is why we have these annual gatherings, so that we can pool our ideas together and so that we can share our stories, that we can shape the ministry as we face increasing challenges in the world that we live in today. So what are we doing for time? Last chance. Comments? Pardon? Yep, we have 7 minutes left.
And you won't get your full CEUs unless we use the whole time.
Exactly.
So we need one more question.
And the grant company will be looking at that. Yes.
So just two things. One is thank you very much. And thank you, Karen. I visited with the church in Corning sometime last year. It was the last church that I had not visited. And I was so incredibly moved by the worship service and the meal and the garden that they have. I didn't go outside because there were live chickens, and I don't do that. But good for them for doing it, for just the care that they have for their community. And thank all of you for the ministry that you do, for embodying what I said this morning. That we don't have a lot of big churches, but we have really big ministries. And what you've reminded me of is maybe we need to organize a grant writing workshop or bring somebody who can help us to do that. And I will pledge to get working on that, to see who's out there that we can do that for.
Yeah.
Yep. And then this is a commercial just for worship, to remind you that one of our Samoan congregations, new congregation, is going to be singing in this room at 4:45 for about 15 minutes. And then the music ministry of Live on Purpose, which is incredible, will provide music beginning at 5 and then throughout the closing worship service. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Going once. Going twice. All right. Well, some of our musicians are waiting patiently outside to come in and rehearse anyway, but I want to thank our panelists today. I appreciate that. Tony always manages to give me some kind of a quote that just kind of lives with me from that point on, and I like that. We may not have many big churches, but we've got a lot of big ministries, and so we thank you for your big ministries, even if the church is little.